start and there's so many people that are suffering. Am I going to be in this forever? And so what we're trying to do is step in front of that a little bit and see, see what's going on. Hold on one second. I'm getting a note that we can't be seen. Then that can't happen.
Oh, no.
Let's see what's going on with our channels here. It says YouTube is streaming. It looks like we're streaming on Facebook, X, YouTube. I thought we had Instagram up, but maybe not. We got to update that one apparently to get a streaming key. But from what I'm seeing, it looks like we're on. Can you guys tell me if you can see me on YouTube? Sorry to be interruptive here. Oh, okay. I think, okay, good. We're here. You just want to interrupt me and say hello. Okay, cool. Thank you guys. Thanks for checking in with me on that. But yeah, so we wanted to make something that's just a service for people, even if we are not useful to you beyond like having these conversations, that's fine. But there's one little piece of it that I was talking with Chris about yesterday, and we really thought it would be a good idea to share it in this format because I think it's really useful. And it's something that is actually like you can action this tonight, or maybe you sleep on it and we do it tomorrow. So we're looking forward to that. But before we do that, Dr. Kipros has got to share. She's so excited about it. And so I'm going to stop talking and let her share a nice little story, a little fairy tale for our friends on a Thursday night. What do you think?
Yeah. I'm always excited to share these ones.
I know.
This is the fun part. And I think well, at least the beginning will kind of tie in well, because when we talk about this patient and what she had done a really good job of, before even coming to us, like she'd seen the cardiologist, she'd seen the neurologist, she'd seen the OB. So she had gone and kind of like ruled out the first things that need to be ruled out. And when the solution, like kind of the scary things had been ruled out and there wasn't a solution presented to her, that's where she ended up finding us and coming in. So this patient was a 45-year-old female with chief complaint of just like fatigue and orthostatic intolerance. So she had initially got headaches in her 30s, which had come on and then started to become more present in her life, which wasn't great because she was a writer. Yeah. So being on the computer, looking down, having to concentrate, like the headaches enough weren't wonderful for her. But then over a series of events, so getting sick, pregnancies, having some injuries, what happens is headaches turned into fatigue, which turned into orthostatic intolerance, which turned into palpitations, which turned into like she couldn't be upright or move around without feeling really lightheaded and dizzy. And this is a writer, this is a mom who's trying to homeschool her kids. So life was not going the way she wanted it to be able to go. So when she came into us, we were trying to really find like, okay, we have this constellation of symptoms that are happening and they seem to be related and worse when she's upright. But when she changes positions at all, she will also get symptoms. And she also said that like, sometimes I can even get symptoms when I'm laying down. So we were trying to dig in and go like, okay, what's actually going on here? What might be the root cause of all these things together? So when she came in and we did an exam, there were some things we noticed right off the bat with her when we checked her sensations. So we'll look at, can you feel sharp? Can you feel cold? Can you feel vibration? What we noticed was that on one side of her face and one side of her arm, she couldn't feel the cold or the sharp sensation. But interestingly, that was in a seated position. When we had her laid down, she was able to feel it equal on both sides. So interesting, something cool to notice there. We then looked at her coordination. So when she had to coordinate like tapping of her fingers and quick motions like this, same thing on that side. It was slower. It was less coordinated. But again, we had her lay down. And what did we see? It was better when she was laying down. We then looked, we've talked about it here before, but we looked at a red saturation test. She actually didn't have a difference in the saturation of both eyes. So there wasn't a difference in the way she saw the red. But she goes, yeah, I always have blurriness in this eye. Now, when we laid her down for this one, it didn't change. So even laying down, that blurriness stayed there. If we had her lay down for a prolonged period of time, eventually what would happen if we left her there for about a minute or longer, she would feel like she was falling asleep. And what we would see happen is that her eyes would just slowly close and she would become aphasic. So no more words coming out of her to tell us. And she said, yeah, I get that feeling like I'm falling asleep and like blood is draining out of my head. It's mostly when I'm upright, but if I just lay flat, I can also recreate that feeling. So right away that happened, and we looked at like, okay, is there some sort of change we can do right here in the moment to see how we can alter this? And we found that if she was laying there and we went in and gave her a big push, a big contact right here at where her kind of neck meets her upper back, her eyes would pop open again and she felt like there was blood coming back to her head. So right away, cool moment that happened right in the exam. She's like, well, that's never happened before. So we can also expect, I mean, she kind of told us coming in, reading gives her headaches. So when we put those VOG goggles on, we saw these little square wave oscillations when she was moving her eyes quickly, moving her eyes slowly, doing pursuits, doing saccades. We saw those throughout the whole test. And then finally, we put her up for that tilt test. We looked at the cerebral perfusion and we saw what by this point we could probably imagine we were going to see, which is that she was not super efficient at keeping the blood flow in her head when she was upright. So when we look at those charts and tables and we're looking at what percentage of that patient can keep the blood in their head from when they're going from that laying down to upright position, by the end of that 10 minutes, she was in the 50% of keeping the blood. And we want that to be up like 85 and 90. So some definite work to do.
Yeah, it's not a small amount, is it?
No, it's pretty significant for someone who wants to be like up and taking care of kids and has a goal of exercising. It's definitely something that needs improving.
Okay, so walk us through the next part. Don't leave us hanging.
This is the fun part. So what we had to pay attention to with this patient is what position are we going to be able to do work that she has and can maintain blood in her head. So we're looking at for her, okay, upright, at the moment she's not super efficient at doing it. But then if she's also just purely laying down without any support, we're seeing a decrease there too. So the first thing we started with is what input can we use to put her head and neck in a position that we can keep the head perfused with blood. So we started to give passive feedback, meaning we would use our hands to give feedback, that proprioceptive input right through that area of the spine we found in the exam. So we started there. And then we said, okay, if this input is good, how do we start having her body be able to do that when she's moving positions? So we started us giving that input, and then we went into her starting to be able to squeeze her shoulder blades together and give that input. And then we got to use our really cool Neuro 20 suit. So we got to get that on her and have the suit give her more feedback from her body so that we could transition to having her laying down to having her up and moving around, where we started to use some actual like muscle engagement. So her actively engaging through that area of the spine. And this was really cool because we saw in our exam that with her just standing upright, when she closed her eyes, she would fall over. So we used that Neuro 20 and we said, is this going to be a good thing? When we got her upright, we had her stand, close her eyes, and with the Neuro 20 suit on, she could stay balanced for the full 20 seconds. So we used that as a tool. And once we were able to see that sensation coming in and getting stronger, we started to use some other movements. So some complex movements, figure eights of her arms, And then we moved eventually into using eye and head movement through a gaze stabilization exercise. So what was really cool to her was to see that transition of, we had to passively do all of the work to give her that feedback, and then we could use the suit to do it. But then eventually we got it so her body was getting that activation on its own, and she was like walking around the clinic and actually walked to and from the clinic by the second week, which for her was just amazing. She had no exercise tolerance prior to coming, so her being able to do that walk every day, I mean, we were proud, she was proud. It was a very exciting week of progress for her.
I like that very much. So I think if I could encapsulate the moral of that story, is kind of, we understood, we were able to figure out like, what is the problem we should actually try to be solving here. And the interesting part was, it was kind of this feedback problem where we're just not getting enough charge coming into the neck, which is tough when we think about that from the propriospinal system, where all of that stuff that should be firing automatically, it's almost like the volume is just turned down too low. It's like when, you go to listen to your music and you turn it all the way up, but it's still too quiet. That's what this feels like. And your brain just can't put together all of the different inputs in a way that becomes as useful. So that whole thing just is dimmer. Like life in general just gets dimmer. And to me, it's really profound that something that simple can have such a huge effect on your life. So it's really easy in the journey of like, everything is everywhere and I got to solve all these problems and I should solve these big things. For a lot of people, it actually starts out from these really, it seems almost too simple sometimes. And I think that's kind of what this was like. It's like, it's almost too simple that there's just no signal. Can we get it passively? Oh, everything kicks on. But then you can't walk around with Dr. Kipros holding your neck all the time. Like, that's not going to work. It's lovely, but it's not going to work. So being able to move that from, we will do it for you, to we will give you an assistance with doing it, to now you do it on your own. It's like, see one, do one, teach one, almost in a way, where it's just that progression through. And I think that that's super important to highlight, that is not abnormal.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not like a one-off. It's like, that's kind of the pattern that most people follow. Would you say, is that an accurate way to put it? So I guess I say it to be a little bit encouraging, to where it's like that linear model can be helpful. Just a lot of times our starting place for what we're trying to fix is that we're going to try to fix it with something that can do it right now. And we're going to do this big home run, rather than backing the dose actually way, way, way down and starting with what you can do and then building from what you can do, rather than saying like, this is where I used to operate and I'm going to do something that's just going to leap me back to here. It's just not going to work. You have to climb each rung of the ladder all the way up. And I think that part, while it is not as exciting, is a cleaner path to actually just getting better. So hopefully that helps. Anything to add there, Doc?
Well, I mean, I agree. I also think using that allows us to build successes as we go, and like see that achievement build and build over time. And ultimately, by the end of her second week, we redid that tilt test and she was in 80% or above for the whole 10 minutes. And she even subjectively noted, like, this feels different than it did before. Like, she didn't feel lightheaded. She's like, this feels like how people should feel upright, I guess. I didn't know what
and
this
to be honest, we've got to measure that. So it's really hard to just take people down the road of like, you do something, you feel better. Because I don't know about you guys, but anybody who's ever tried to lift weights in their life and like get strong, like the bodyguard, every set he does is to the point where he's about to puke, right? So it's like, it's hard. It doesn't feel good. It's sore the next day. So there's a part of that we're trying to achieve, is like, we're trying to push it just beyond what you're capable of, just so that brain has to generate all that plasticity, go recover and heal, come back tomorrow, push it. So that is my constant refrain, but I'm going to just keep saying it the rest of my life. How's that?
I think it's smart.
I'm just going to keep saying it the rest of my life. and that's what I'll do. So there it is. Doc, I wanted to show you real quick this roadmap.
Yeah.
Also, it just went live on the website and we did test it, but I'm not 100% sure that it's going to come through. So if you guys want to go try to download it and then let me know how that goes, this would be a great test, and we'll see how that whole process is working. I guess that'll be what we get. And if it doesn't work, let me know and we can still get it to you, or we will fix it so that it does work. So I'm going to share real quick if you got a minute. I know you got to get to your kiddo.
I can hear some exciting playing going on upstairs. So
yeah, what are they getting into
right
these
now?
days? All right, so this is it. This is a PDF, very fancy. We're super thrilled, but it just goes through just kind of a step by step, and we put a workbook with it. Something you can kind of check off. We even made Chris's idea. We made a printer friendly version so that when you try to print this sucker, you're not just draining your black ink. So we have one that is just black and white. So don't fret, and you can print it out and then use it as a way to generate some questions, some ideas, all those things. But today we're going to kind of start with this beauty right here. Let me see if I can make it big. Give me just a moment to finagle this. But yeah, so this is what we're going to play with, Doc. So this is kind of the culmination of a lot of time spent trying to make this easier for folks. And we wanted to have something that sometimes when, we've been doing, how long have we been doing live streams, Doc?
Well, we started before I had my child who just turned 1.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we are like solidly over a year.
Yeah.
And so we've been kind of working on this that whole time. But one of the things we've been, so when you do it for a long time, I don't want people to think like all we're trying to do is say, we are the only ones that can solve your problem. Come see us. I don't think we give that vibe, to be honest. We give an effort not to, but so we also wanted to have something that helps people in the phases of the game before it's time to come see us and help to navigate that. So, because it can be, it's kind of like the Wild West sometimes where you don't know what to do. And because there's so many options, you can feel like there's so many options. I don't know what to do. So you kind of end up doing nothing, or you end up doing the one that is the cheapest, or, whatever. And what we kind of are trying to design is like, here's just a way to think yourself through it. And then that way, whoever you do have near you or whoever's in your life that's helping out, there's at least you can keep track of it and kind of make sure you're not skipping steps along the way where you might miss something that's just super easy. So maybe, do we have the link? You might have to go to the homepage at kaiserclinic.com, and then we'll make sure between Ginia and the squad, we'll make sure we get it in the notes here or in the chat. But you can just go on the main website, kaiserclinic.com, and I think it's got a banner there that you can hit and you can download it and get it from us. But this is kind of where we're going to start. What do you think, Doc?
Yeah, let's do it. I did just check the website. So if you hop on, there's a roadmap. There's like a link right at the top of the homepage. You can just click it.
Awesome. Cool. So this is the thing that we talk about in the clinic all the time. Constantly, we just kind of put it into a graphic form. And then, just going through, I'll just highlight a couple other quick things for you. We'll come back to this, but it's just got like ways to think about it, the key insights for kind of each step, kind of walks it through, makes it easy for like putting things together and merging what's available conventionally with like, what is kind of the next step forward. It's got some questions you can use to ask your doctor and kind of get a sense of that. We talk a little bit about medications. I'm not a medical doctor, don't prescribe it. So, take that for what it is. It's not medical advice. It's just the mechanisms of what they do, which are available anywhere. And then questions for your doctor, just ways that you can kind of take this forward, map it out for yourself, and then be able to figure out where the things you have done, the things you haven't done, where the gaps are, and use that kind of gap analysis to move forward from where you are today. But I think the step that I want to focus on, and Doc, I can let you go because I know it's playtime, so I don't want to keep you. But we're going to talk about this. Cool.
Okay. Sounds fun.
Thank you for sharing tonight.
Of course. It's so nice
As
to
always.
be on here, and everyone in the chat, as always, is wonderful and saying hi and has the best questions. So enjoy the rest of the live, and we'll be back at the clinic rolling tomorrow.
Sounds great. Thanks for
Okay.
doing it. Appreciate you.
Have a great night.
Okay, we'll let Dr. Kibros go. I would have kept her on all night, but I know she's got a wonderful kiddo to go play with, so I don't want to hold her back. But let's walk through this real quick. So this graph is kind of born out of the idea that we are very aware of kind of the moment that things started to go south, or we really started to notice they went south in a way that was not recoverable. And I'm just gonna change this a little bit here. And when that happens, all of us, myself included, you kind of do this thing where you do this analysis of like, all right, what did I just do? Because I will never do it again, I promise. And so you start looking for all the things, and that kind of gives us the core of our story in terms of like, I got COVID and then it happened, or I had this head injury and then it happened, or I got sick and then it happened. But a lot of times that catalyst, if we actually go back in time, we will find in the exam history that that is not actually probably the very first little signal that something was wrong. A lot of times there are little breadcrumbs from other things that have happened throughout your life that not only are signals of what was there, but can contribute in a way where they're not just part of your story, it's part of like how your body is currently compensating. Because if you think about it, if I've got an injury, I'm way back here on the chart. I have an injury. I'm doing pretty great. I have an injury. I maybe don't run, I'm not as clean, but it's like it doesn't affect me in a major way, right? So you see down here, you've got this yellow dotted line that says symptom threshold. So it's like you've got a large gap to go before you kind of start to feel real bad. And so you might just have these things that occur and then you kind of recover from them, and you're doing pretty well. This line here, this gray line, may actually look more like a little wave where things happen and it goes down. You got sick and then it kind of comes back again. Or then I got kicked in the head by a horse and then it comes back again. And then, whatever. I was sitting in the drive-through too long and I don't know what it is. Your head was turned too long, whatever. But so over time, that can start to decrease the capacity until we break through that symptom threshold. And that catalyst is the thing we tend to focus on. But a lot of times, if we want to understand what treatment actually becomes, we have to know all the things that were beforehand, because usually there are clues in that where those are actually the compensations that broke. So you were able to adapt, able to compensate for a period of time until you just weren't able to compensate anymore. You were able to duct tape that thing together over and over and over again until one day that duct tape kind of broke and you weren't able to duct tape it back together anymore. And then now you're kind of stuck in that position. But if we go back and we fix, so here's an example from my life. So I remember as a kid, my dad, my grandfather, and his grandfather, they all grew up in the same town. I'm the fourth generation of people from Chelsea, Michigan. Go Bulldogs. But the important part about that, they all grew up on the farms. They had to like figure stuff out. So I remember one time as a kid, my dad, in the exhaust system on his truck, there was a hole. We live in Michigan. Stuff rusts like crazy. That's just the way it goes. And it was on the weekend and it was super loud, number one, but it was also affecting the performance of the engine. So what he did was he had these, I don't remember what you call them, the metal rings that tighten up with the screwdriver and they get smaller. Somebody's going to say it and I'm going to feel dumb. But he had those, and then he had these Campbell's soup cans. So he cut the Campbell's soup cans and he used those clamps and he put it around that hole and he covered the hole, clamped it up, and then it worked like new, right? But then, a couple years later, same truck, it failed in the same spot. That part happens to get hot on that particular model of a truck. It blows through that can, and then now it's blown through in a way that like you can't repair it because now it's cut in half and the muffler falls off, right? So in some ways, this is kind of like that, where we can kind of, our system can really fight to repair it for a while until there's something big enough to where it just can't hang on, and we need to come in and take that away, solve the whole problem again. When we get stuck, like just going after that catalyst, we're just going to try to fix whatever, we use the example of, COVID. Once that infection's gone, though, it's like we're still in a position where we have to help that underlying system. And I think that's the part that gets missed for a lot of people. So what I want to encourage is, if you haven't done it yet, get a sheet of paper, get a notebook, get your iPhone out, type it on the computer, whatever you have. But I would just go back on the timeline from as early as you can remember and just list all of the things. List all of the silly injuries that seem like they were no big deal. Just the bumps and the bruises and the falls and the playing as a kid and the stuff that you probably don't even remember. And then you think about, like, did I have any surgeries? Okay, those are always good things to keep in mind. Did I have to use anesthesia? When did I have to use medications? When did I get immunizations along the way? Did I have any surgeries or, like, big events that were big stressors on my body? Did I get sick in major ways along? Even if I didn't get diagnosed with anything, were there times where, like, I was really knocked out enough to where I remember that, or my parents remember that? And if you kind of just start working on that, it may seem tedious. And I know that it can be stressful a lot of times when you're in the doctor's office, because you feel like you're in the gates at the Derby, and you're like, I got 5 minutes to tell my life story, and you're just trying to, like, hit them with the high points. But if you do that and you have someone that is genuinely interested in understanding that whole progression of the story, I cannot tell you how useful that is from my perspective as a clinician. Because there are so many times when it's like, yep, it was this one thing. And then we go back and we just say, well, what about, tell me about 2 years prior, any of these things that happened. We'll just kind of start pulling them out of memory. Mom, you can contribute to. And we just start pulling them out. And then all of a sudden there's like this, but yeah, there was that one time where, do you remember when I fell down the stairs and I got a little weird, like I got sick after that? Do you remember that? Like, yeah, there were some things that were, it wasn't exactly like this, but I did have some things that were kind of similar. It was like the first time I felt lightheaded, but then it went away, right? Those things are important. You should share them. And especially now in the days of AI, because you can just turn your voice recorder on and just start talking and let it record all those things, and it'll summarize it for you. So things like that are incredibly useful. And if you're in a spot where you're stuck right now, something as simple as going back and just documenting all of those things might give you that little epiphany of like, ooh, these things are in common. Maybe I should also be kind of looking at this. And maybe there's a way that I should start to understand this a little bit better. And it zooms out just enough to where you might find it useful to your case, and getting unstuck, kind of like getting into a different gear, getting out of the mud and getting you going again. So if you haven't done it and you're still in a spot where you're stuck, even if you feel like, I know what this is, do it for fun. Just see what you see, because you might find something in there that is useful. Maybe not even in this moment, but maybe it's useful in the future. Blue Ghost Rider's got a little input here. Said, for me, it was a chokehold during a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match where my neck went pop, and it all started after that, right? And I would be willing to bet in a life where if you were in a match, you were probably reasonably competitive, so you're probably good. So there were even probably little things from practice that might have happened along the way that might have loosened up the screws a little bit. There might have been other matches. There might have been other conditioning things. Like, I know I had those in wrestling. I eventually had a fracture in my neck, but before that, we were doing just these dummy things and gator rolls. So you're letting someone else do it. And someone was, basically they get your legs intertwined and then they step over. So it forces you to spin around and then turn to your back and then back around. But when he did it, he stepped over my legs and fell, but he had my legs like knotted up in his arms. So when he fell, I did like a full scorpion, just in my whole back, just, like a firework. And at the time, no big deal. Nothing really happened. But I was getting ready to wrestle in regionals at that time. And like 2 days later, I got violently sick. Like we were at sixth grade camp. I had to leave sixth grade camp to come home because I was sick. And then I wrestled 2 days later, sick as a dog. But going back, we never put any of that together. Nobody ever said anything, never even like thought about it. But looking back on it and realized like that was a little catalyst. And then I had another injury later on. And just like all those things are worth recognizing because they do, whether we want to believe it or not, they're all part of who we are at some measure. So anyway, so hopefully that is useful. Yeah, this is Matheson had said, I thought perhaps it wasn't so important for me to go through my prior health history if I went to a clinic like yours because the testing would reveal whatever errors I have that need treatment now. And in a lot of ways they do objectively, but sometimes it'll help guide you what we should be looking for and how to weight some of the decisions in terms of like, if you're at home right now trying to figure out where do I need to go for help, being able to do that can be really useful. It might stimulate getting a certain test done or walking down a certain path. So anything that's going to be helpful. But we go through this big long history in everyone because we want to understand also what things are going to be adaptations and which things are going to be compensations. So when we are measuring things, sometimes you're looking at this reciprocal relationship of like, is this the cause or is this the thing that's holding it all together? And the more you can understand where the other injuries are, it's like if someone has a neck injury, but they've also got this vestibular thing, I'm going to be very careful in the way that I approach that because I want to make sure that as I introduce movement of the head and neck, I'm not going to irritate something here that is then going to lead to a dystonia or a different sort of a vascular event or a migraine or things that are going to throw it off in a different way because I'm not understanding how these things work together. So the more information you have, the better it's going to be for sure. For sure. This one's good because should unresolved emotional traumas be included? I think so. If they're part of you, it may not be the full contribution, but remember, the top of your autonomic system can be influenced by the way that you perceive things. And so if I have something where I have an event and it makes me fearful of things around a similar event, I'm probably more likely to actually have an increased arousal level in those environments. And that's useful to know because it helps understand how can we approach that in a way where we discharge some of that relationship. We kind of break those bonds so that we don't become kind of like we don't become like a reflexive machine to an emotion that we're not really controlling, right? So we don't want I'm speaking generally, but kind of don't want to be living our lives in this reflexive response to whatever is a stimulus in our environment. We want to be able to like kind of control what we're focusing on, control how that influences us, and be able to kind of work through that in a useful way. Yeah, so Susan is kind of, she's given like a summary here. So does cumulative injury or insult just build sometimes until your body can't adapt? I think that's a lot of people. So one of the early examples for me when I first started to understand this was when we were working with these athletes. Concussion was a big part of what we were doing. But you would notice that there was a certain cohort of people that were high-level athletes, usually men, and they would retire and they'd be doing things and working. They get to their 50s and 60s, they start to slow down a little bit. They're not moving as much. They're starting to get a little heavier. And then now all of a sudden, because they're not using all of that compensation from their proprioceptive system, now all of a sudden the dizziness starts to come out. And so that in those cases, we realized like, oh, their body was so fit and sensitive, like everything was so good that they were able to kind of outweigh what was happening in that vestibular processing system or in the visual processing system. But when that system also started, it wasn't as like tip top anymore and it started to drop down. It's almost like the tide going out. And as that tide was going out, we could see those other errors underneath. And it was just enough to where they would start to present with symptoms, even though the original injury or catalyst happened years ago back in their playing days. but their ability to just adapt and compensate had started to deteriorate over time. And now we see these symptoms start to show up that were from these things that were a long time ago. So hopefully that makes sense. Cool. All right. Yeah, this is a good point from Cam, a good friend Pam. Johns Hopkins published a study a couple years ago about the 2-hit hypothesis with long COVID. However, seems like treatment hasn't shifted from undoing the catalyst to rehabbing the injury. Right. Yeah. So it's kind of like, in theory, people kind of understand this, but in practice of like, how do we just help people feel better, get stronger, move on with their lives? Some of that, what they call bench to bedside, hasn't quite come through. That's a really good contribution, Cam. Thank you. Okay. Hello, one for one, Bella. I made a phone call consult with your clinic. Do I need to go through the full history during that time? In the call, if it's long, try to summarize, like you mentioned. History is a lot to go over in minutes. Absolutely. So in those calls, we're trying to figure out not so much what is the depth of how to solve it, but if we're in the right spot. Because we want to make sure that if people are spending the time and energy and money to work with us, that we have people that we think there's a really high probability that we can help. So that's our first barrier. So if we don't think there's a really good chance that we can help, then we want to kind of move you to someone that might be a better fit, or down the line of testing that might be more useful. We want to make sure that when people come to us, like we're in a position to be the maximum amount useful to them. So this isn't the time to do like the whole story. We do that once people get to the clinic. That first phone call is really about making sure that we're in the right ballpark. We look at, the doctors that we have that will talk to you are looking for some very specific things to make sure that it's going to be a good fit. And they're looking to rule out making sure that it's not something that needs to be done elsewhere first. It's a good question. Linda says, when I was a young kid, I would get weird sensation when I lay down because my vision became jerky and I get disoriented. And I also get these night paralyses. Yeah, so these are things. So good example. Useful to know. Definitely worth sharing. I've got some sense of that. Obviously, we can't give full workup here on a chat, but yeah, so these things will go back in time and they'll become useful to bring them forward. Have we had people go from bedbound to athletes again? Yeah, absolutely. For sure. As a pro rock climber, that's amazing. I probably will want to hear about that. Wonder if I'll ever do it again at a high level. First step is to figure out, it's kind of like, I like this idea of like not seeing it, not just using hope as a strategy. So like not seeing everything is rosy and it's going to be wonderful and I'll think my way to the top, but also not seeing it worse than it is and not feeling like, oh, it'll never be better. And the best way to get there is to try to really, from my perspective, is to understand what can I solve in front of me? What behaviors can I do that can help me to get stronger so that I can move forward? That's kind of it, right? It's really the behaviors, the things that you do, the things that you build that are going to make the biggest difference. The feelings are there and they make, kind of, you're going to feel up sometimes, you're going to feel down sometimes, they're always going to be there. But that doesn't necessarily serve as the best marker for what to do next for a lot of people, if that makes sense. So shifting from the feeling to the doing can be really useful, because then you got a target, what you're trying to solve. Once I solve that, where am I? And you just keep going forward and doing it methodically like that is the best way I know how. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to take a couple of these. Hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, like I said, we're excited about that roadmap as a way just to kind of give a tool. It's free. I mean, it's a thing that it's taken me forever to learn, and we're just trying to give it to you guys. It'll be a living document. It'll probably change over time once I realize there are things I forgot to put in there. But hopefully it's at least a good starting place for most of you. Cool. All right. Let's see here. I'm just going through. I've answered a couple of these. Could an injury from years or even decades ago cause dysautonomia all those years later? Yeah, but it kind of looks like that graph where it may not be like, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, I broke, to more like things kind of got a little shaky and are breaking down, and then all of a sudden I couldn't compensate anymore. Is maybe a better way to think about it. So, it's not like there was a clock for most people and it just all of a sudden time's up. But as things deteriorate in the system over a lifetime, they tend to do that. As their life comes in, those things deteriorate, and we can see those problems develop as they accumulate on top of one another. Okay. Okay. Dr. Ginny, have our Colombians come in? Claire had mentioned a phone call with the Colombians, and she was so happy to talk to them. And they said they were going to be here tonight, so I wanted to give them a shout out. And my question is I know they're always here, and my question was if they throw the Spanish version of me on and like use a translator, because I would like to hear what that sounds like, or if they listen to me in English. So if you're out there, let me know. Okay. Do I think dysautonomia is a form of autoimmunity, or how are the two connected? If not, it seems like many people have both at the same time. Yeah, I think that's a very common good thing to observe. I would invite you to think about it in this way. So there was I think it was in the neurology book written by Patton, and what it talks about is you can kind of boil most of the functions in the human body down to there is some type of an input, whether that's an external sensory input or an internal sensory input. It gets processed and converted into some type of an output. Usually that output is considered motor. So something moves. So that could be as simple, like the easy one is like skeletal muscle, right? Signal comes in, contracts the muscle tissue, it moves my joint, moves the bone. You could also think about that in terms of like a gland, right? So my salivary glands, when I see a big juicy steak and my mouth starts to water, that happens because I get a signal that goes in and it causes that gland to contract and it releases the saliva from that system. Okay. When I think about my blood vessels, I stand up and those blood vessels will start to get a little more pressure because gravity is now involved. And what happens? I get a reflex and they contract and then they push that blood back up, right? So these are all things that move. So I'm getting an event that happens, I'm processing that event, and then I'm getting a movement. And so when you think about the immune system or the hormonal system or the adrenal system or the pancreatic system, in all of these events, we have these organs that are kind of like the little factories making, like accumulating this chemistry, and then that chemistry is released. But that released is there's a movement to that, right? So it is being held, and then it is being let go, right? It's being held, and then it's let go. So if we think about the immune system, we talk about it in those terms, right? We mobilize our immune system. So most of that immune system happens in your gut, happens in other barrier systems, your blood-brain barrier, obviously, your vascular barrier, your skin is a barrier. These are your main sources of the immune system, that army, that protectorate. So remember that when we see changes in cerebral blood flow, changes in anything where we have an alteration in control systems of the brain, we're going to have some effect on the way that we distribute those signals, and then therefore the way we distribute the blood that goes with those signals. If our immune system is there, remember, it is also mobilized in the similar way. So there is a signal that something is there that should not be, and then our immune system is going to be activated, which means we're going to release certain chemistry, right? We can get into the immunoglobulins and the cytokines and all of those things, but they're the soldiers, just chemistry that are going to go out. Macrophages are going to try to capture stuff, ingest it, get rid of it, break it apart, get rid of it. We're going to flag it so we get more cells that come in. All these things are motor responses. So the same way we can have problems with our autonomic system. I stand up, I don't get the signal quite right that I should increase the blood flow to my brain. That kind of melts down a little bit, and then I got to have a compensation of heart rate to deal with it. So same thing can happen with our immune system, where on one end, you can have somebody where something is creating a problem with, or there's maybe a different way. There's something foreign that is there that should not be there, and we don't recognize it, and we allow it to persist for way longer than it should be, right? That's one form of it. Those are the things we see where when that immune system is low, our pH is going to change, and then we see these opportunistic things happen where we get like SIBO or a mold infection where our body is just not on guard enough to really fight it off in a normal way. The pH changes, the weeds grow in. And then on the other end of that, we see where the same way someone can be hyperreactive, right? So we tap a reflex here in the scapulohumeral reflex and they're jumpy, too jumpy, right? We tap their biceps reflex, too jumpy. It's too much. The response is too big, too sensitive. Sensitive to light, sensitive to movement, makes me feel bad, okay? Same idea with, we think about autoimmunity, where the response is so big that we're attacking stuff it shouldn't even attack. We can't even recognize what we're supposed to attack because we're so dang sensitive. And that's on the other side. And again, we're still in these signaling mechanisms. So people that hurt their brain, turns out they also, the same way they can have problems with reflexes that affect blood flow, they can also have problems with reflexes that affect the immunological system. This is why there's such an uptick when people have injuries to the brain. There's such an uptick in food sensitivities and in skin irritation and rashes and inflammation in their joints that come after hitting your head. And some of you maybe recognize that in yourselves. And that's really important because we don't want to necessarily think about them as being separate or necessarily as having like, it's always, goes this way, then this way. They work in tandem because it's all an integrated system that works together. So that's a long way to describe it. But I know a lot of people will experience immune compromise in either direction as part of what they're dealing with. And it's really important, and from my perspective, to think about that on a whole basis and see is there a thing that we could do that would kind of solve both of these problems together? Okay. Okay. Hopefully that's helpful. How are you guys doing tonight? I'm going to read through these a little bit. Hopefully you're doing well. I was rushing to get here, so I'm glad I made it on time. Was hanging with my kiddos and had a meeting, and then the meeting went longer than I thought, and then hustle, go. Okay, so also when you guys put stuff in and you keep bringing it to the top, so Dr. Marsico, she kind of dumps all of these into a chat box for me, so the questions are there. But when you put them in there a bunch of times, it makes it complicated for me because it pushes everybody else's comments around. So you don't have to post it twice. Actually, like in the back of my head, when you start posting it more than once, it makes me kind of want to ignore it, but I won't. But that way it just doesn't push everybody else's stuff out. So we have you, we see you. Some of them I'll get to, some I won't. But when you put it in there a bunch of times, it makes it more complicated for me because I've already seen it, but then I'm trying to read it amongst the other ones and I can't quite get it. So if you could do me that kindness, I would really appreciate it. Okay. Robin's here. Good to know. Good to know. Thanks for being. Yeah, catch it on the other one. Leave me some comments there. Okay. Let's see. Okay, this one comes up a lot, so I'm gonna answer this one first. Okay. How does one tease out overlapping symptoms from things like hyper EDS, so hypermobile EDS, Hashimoto's, subclinical Addison's? So it's a good question because it shows up in a lot of people, right? And it might be worth kind of trying to determine which things that could potentially be related because they're similar complexes. or which things are not. So for example, like hypermobile EDS is tough because this is the one that doesn't have a blood test. You're really just relying on like physically looking at the way people move. And then whether or not that is causal to your symptoms really depends. So there are plenty of people, like I will walk down the beach and I will see plenty of people and I will be grading them and biting scores and they're running around having a good time, like in the heat, they're doing okay. Right. I go to gymnastics and I see people, same thing, like bendy as can be, they're doing okay. I'm watching their eyes and I'm watching where they walk and I'm looking for pulses in their neck. Like I'm probably weird to watch. Anyway, but I'm constantly looking at these things because you can see people that would fit these scores but generally do okay. So there's this selection bias that is there. Regardless of whether or not that's a thing, what we really want to understand is that the thing, is that the thing that's causing this problem, or is it contributing to it in a way where we have to try to create a solution for that? In many ways there are. A lot of people that have hypermobility, like we've talked about before, also have hypotonia. And a lot of people are going to benefit from an increased sensory load through that system, increasing proprioceptive responses. And it may just be part of a lifelong practice of increasing that sensory processing. But anything we do that affects that has the potential to create all sorts of downstream effects. So like when we look at Hashimoto's and Addison's, we don't know if those are things that are relative in any individual case, like to your history, your family history. Is that something that's developed out of a problem with blood sugar? Is that a problem that's developed because we've had an injury to your brain? So how we get there matters. So I think I don't like the algorithm of saying like, if this, then that. What I'd like to do is say in those types of conditions, like what are the boundary conditions here? What are the biggest elements that are affecting the way that you're working? And if we can remove those, if we can solve for them, can we make it so that system works better in the environment where you still have those things going on, right? So if you've got, antibodies to your thyroid, your body's going to have that potential to have those antibodies for the rest of your life. Now, how often you flare and to what degree they flare and how tight your immune system can start to respond, those things are variable. Same thing with the Addison's. Is that contributed to by the hypermobility or not? Are you hypermobile as an ancillary finding to what's going on, or is that the thing that's causing it because you're getting so much movement that it becomes compressive to things? So you're just trying to solve for like what's causing what and what do I really need to pay attention to, which is really hard because in the search for trying to find the problems, when you go everywhere, they're gonna like find stuff. And if they find stuff, sometimes it's hard to know, is that a thing? Like how much attention should I pay to that relative to what I'm trying to solve for? And that part's really hard when you're not exactly sure which way to go. So I'm sensitive to that for sure, which is part of why we made our roadmap. So hopefully that helps. Okay. There's this other one from Raspberry Man. Let's look at this one. Let's see. Why did the nervous system get so more symptomatic when it constantly tries to maintain the neck? Interesting. When I drove, my body felt worse over time. Venous return worsened as my neck worsens. Okay. I appreciate you giving us a little insight on that. Notice had to pull over a lot, try to maintain. So what I think I'm hearing there is like trying to maintain your neck. Is that like maintain your neck position? Yeah, so we talk about this quite a bit in terms of that venous drainage, number one. So veins are really easy to compress. I mean, you guys can look at it if you got veins on your arms. It's really easy to just touch that vein and collapse it because it's not like a strong flow. You think about like the amount of water trickling down your gutters versus like if you turn the hose all the way up, it's just a different pressure. So the hose would be like the arteries, the gutters would be like your veins. So you almost kind of rely on something giving pressure to them. If you're someone who has, this neck injury, I don't know if you guys tell me if you feel the same way. New cars, for whatever reason, it feels like that headrest back here is like jamming your head forward. Maybe I'm the only one, but I feel like I got to really rig that thing so that I can sit up tall. I don't know. Am I the only one? Am I just a weird height? Or Eileen, do I need a haircut pushing that thing out? But let me know if you notice that. But it can be that sliding position for a lot of people, especially if we've had this extension kind of an injury, can be unforgiving in the sense that it narrows that lumen. So if you think about, I've got kind of a pathway that looks like that between my two vertebrae. And as those vertebrae slide, I'm oversimplifying, but as they slide, you see how it's going to change how big that tube is that those vessels all run through. So if I'm sliding that head around and it moves too much, even just being in that faulty position can affect the way that blood flow works. So for a lot of people, that's this thing that we just don't pay attention to that can have a huge effect. A lot of times we're just working on getting to control that system better so that the movement is stacked and it's more congruent to the way that the system was designed. Okay. Oh, good. Me and Mary, we're on the same page. That headrest just, I hate it. I got to rig that thing around. I don't like it. Okay. Boutique's with me too. Martha's with me. Okay, I feel better now. Okay, this question from Mathisen, kind of wondering about, so hypotonicity relative to connective tissue orders, like that's a big deal. I feel like that's a big leverage point for a lot of people. Because I think just the diagnostic criteria pushes you down like this, the laxity model. It's like the same people that look at whether or not a joint has laxity are not the same people that are really good at determining like muscle tone. So like you get neurology and then you got like orthopedics kind of rheumatology over here. And they just don't mix very well. And so anytime you've got somebody that's like, I'm really bendy, and you want to look at, is that coupled with hypotonia? Because if it's coupled with hypotonia, this puts us in a position where we are way more likely to create some of those compressions. And obviously, like vascular surgery is certainly an option for some people, but it's not an option in some cases. In some cases, there's conservative measures that make sense beforehand. So being able to control that movement again, so we're not just flopping around, but you can have, there is a world where you can have an increased capacity for motion that's limited or restrained by having a more dense, responsive muscular system. So looking at how those two things interface can be a real big leverage point, because you can actually make a big change there that's really useful for people without necessarily having to push forward into some of the more aggressive vascular things. But for some people, those vascular surgeries can be really helpful. So it's good to be able to weigh the two against each other. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm feeling real good that all you are with me on. We can all agree on the headrest. All right, cool. Let's see. Candace is kind of asking the same thing. What about when EDS is involved? How do you solve the root problem when that particular condition is at play? So that's a huge part, because we're kind of starting with the assumption for a lot of people, and I don't know that that's you, but a lot of people assume like, oh no, I have this autonomic problem. Oh no, I have EDS. Oh no, there's nothing I can do because I have this genetic problem that is EDS. But in some people, they can just be correlates. They're just two things that happen at the same time. We see tons of people with EDS that do great with rehab. It's really a sense, and a lot of people, it doesn't really play a major role in what they're dealing with. And some people, it really does, and then we have to solve that problem differently. But it's going to be different depending on what is the causality here. And if you got someone that you're having a compression in your neck versus someone who's got an infection and then we lose auto regulation, we're going to solve those completely differently. So so I guess maybe when I look at those things, you can have the whole lot of them, same as with the Hashimoto's and Addison's. What you're trying to figure out is how much is this contributing to this particular problem, if I'm trying to just eliminate problems and get to the solution, you can try to just keep going through all of them, or you can look at it as like, where do I need to put the most energy first? Which thing can I solve that may impact how these other things go? Is my perspective on it, rather than trying to whack them all over the place. Okay, I'll do a couple more. I didn't read all this one, so we're going to read it on the fly. G-force vertigo moments, like when the earth turned on its side and everything, my body felt like I was falling off the planet. Grabbed hold of my honey for dear life. What is going on there? So this is simple way to think about it. I have no idea for sure because I didn't test any of it. You can think about it as like hallucination of movement, right? So it was the movement that you experienced real. If it was not real, then your brain generated a signal to give you a sensation of movement that didn't match the reality, which tells you the thing that is interpreting those signals is not telling you the truth. That may be a good place to start. Okay. Is long form use of hyperbaric oxygen helpful, especially if there's a concussion involved? I've read that it can help heal the brain. I think hyperbaric oxygen is really cool. Something that we will recommend at times. We used to do in the office, super loud. So we kind of, and people are with us for such a short time that it makes sense to send them out now. But it can be helpful. Again, that doesn't mean it's always helpful. And it can be a great adjunct therapy, especially if you're doing neuro rehab. We really like some of the tools that it can give you. Pushes oxygen really well. Marcy Dragon, you caught me with all the emojis there. I was wondering what you're up to. This is your friendly like button reminder. So I think that means please like our video. Thank you. I don't have enough to say hallucination. Yeah, hallucination doesn't mean that doesn't have to be a scary word. It just is to say like it was a thing that you felt that wasn't there, and it can be just in a moment, but it's worth knowing on kind of what's underneath that. Okay, last one. Let's do this one, and then we'll call it a night. I get flare-ups that will last like a month where I can't retain fluid, like I'm constantly dehydrated. Is that something you see with POTS and doesn't improve? It can happen for lots of reasons. I would look at first steps are just like, again, not medical advice on the internet, but just looking at kidney function, metabolic panels, start at the basics first. I'm sure you probably have, given that you're here. But that fluid management system is another part of that motor system. Cool. Grace, gratitude, grit. Man, those are 3 great G's. Love that. But then you have a J in your profile, which is very interesting. Let's make it a G. I don't comment much, but usually catch your lives. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I don't recall seeing you. The community you built here is like a big happy family. It's really fun, informative, hopeful place to hang out. Thank you very much for saying that. Really appreciate it. That's what we're hoping for. Thanks for commenting. Keep doing it. So far I like every comment you've had. So keep going. Thanks for the reminder from Boutique. Can I describe why it's helpful? Sure, I will do that one more thing. So what HBOT does is it creates a pressurization of oxygen. So it uses what's called a Bohr effect. And that Bohr effect is useful because basically the hemoglobin in your blood, in your red blood cells, has a big core of iron in the middle of it. Now, iron's really useful because it's got such a high density, which means it's got a high ionic concentration, which means it's magnetic, right? It can really hold stuff to it, which makes it useful for carrying around oxygen, makes it useful for carrying around carbon dioxide, which also has the old oxygen on there too. And then it can be useful also with management of hydrogen ions. And so by creating that pressurization, it's kind of like, it's not an electromagnet. I don't want you to think like this isn't factually true, but like for a picture in your brain, it allows you to make that attraction between the oxygen molecule and the hemoglobin a little stronger so that you can force more oxygen onto the hemoglobin, which is going to force more charge. And when you force more charge into that red blood cell, what's kind of neat is when a red blood cell goes through a capillary, I didn't know this until like embarrassingly recently, like in the last 8 years. those capillaries are kind of like a little bit flat. And when those red blood cells come in, it's kind of like something out of Star Wars. They come in, but there's a charge around the outside of that red blood cell, and it matches a charge on that capillary. And it like opens the capillary with the charge. It's like a little magnet comes in and boom, opens the capillary, and then it can come through. Well, in different conditions, when that metabolic system is compromised for whatever reason, the kind of downstream effect of all of it is the charge of the system is going to be not as clean. So our ionic concentrations change, our pH changes, and then all this stuff doesn't work as clean. So those red blood cells, when the charge isn't as strong, they don't push through the capillaries as well, and they kind of clump together and they stick to each other, and the blood flow gets congested. So HBOT becomes really useful because it jams more of those oxygen molecules on, allows you to be able to maintain charge and push it deeper into the tissue. So you're able to get more oxygen to the tissue. Now, it doesn't help necessarily with being able to do that little last mile of being able to make sure that neurovascular system is operating effectively. So it can't make the signal happen. You have to do that part. But when you do that part, it allows you to be able to pull more oxygen to it. So it can be really helpful in that healing process as an adjunct therapy with that. Now, if you're looking at it, that's for like thinking about it in terms of brain. If you're looking at it also in terms like for burns or for other like things you want to heal, let's just say like other tissues you want to heal, same idea. As that healing process is happening and we're having that nice inflammatory load, we need to be able to pull nutrients in. We can pull them in a little bit more passively so we can get more bang for our buck. So it helps to be able to let that system heal up. So as an it's like if you got this, like whatever you're doing as your healing tool, and then you throw that HBOT next to it, it kind of helps accelerate that tool along, if that's a good metaphor for you. Cool. All right. Let's see. Cool. So thank you guys very much for being here. Michelle, good to see you as always. Dr. Marsico put the roadmap, our new roadmap in there. If it does not work right or emails are weird, just send us a note, let us know, and we'll get it fixed up. It'll be a great way for us to test it. And either way, we'll make sure you get it. So thanks for doing that. Oh, Robin. Agreed, Grace. The positivity and community of these lives helps mentally. It's therapy whilst being educational. Just the time difference is challenging. Yeah, Robin's got it tough on the time. I apologize, Simon. All right. Another kind one from Mary. Even though I spent time with the team in the clinic, I continue to learn and connect more dots, joining you here every week. Thank you so much. And I'm so grateful for the time you share. I'm grateful for you. Thanks for contributing. We really appreciate it. Hope is on the menu here. This hungry gal is grateful. Alex says, God bless. I really appreciate you all. Thanks so much for being here. I'm sorry I missed last week. I had a conference to go to. It was good. I learned some things. It's really great. So thanks for being here. We'll do it again next week. We'll see you then. Take care, guys.